Call Don now, 682-1270. News Talk 1270 KIML.
News Talk 1270 KIML. Don Carpenter Show. Welcome back. Coming up on 7:08, and we're going to go right to the phones. We have a special guest on the line, and we should have, hopefully I hit the right button, we should have Amy Otto from the Federalist on the air. Are you with us?
Hi, I'm on the air with you guys.
Okay,
Hi,
well,
good
morning. When I put you on hold, I hit one of the wrong buttons. I was like, oh no, I hope I did not hang up on her. We've had a little bit of a technical difficulties around here this morning, so it wouldn't have surprised me if I hung up on you by accident. Good morning and welcome. I saw a couple articles that you've written about this Planned Parenthood. I hate to use the word scandal because it's much worse than a scandal, but we've been covering over the past couple weeks, and I saw this article that you wrote in the Federalist last week that really debunks a lot of the arguments being made in defense of Planned Parenthood. So we'll talk about that in a second, but first, why don't we find out a little bit about you and your background?
Sure. My background, actually, my undergrad is in biochemistry, which is probably a little bit of the reason I can talk a little bit more about the science. But I've been writing for the Federalist about politics and culture for about 2 years now, and have been enjoying doing that at this point. So, but I was glad to be able to use some of my background and previous work to kind of debunk some of the things that are being said today, because I don't think people should have to fear that they're in an ethical quandary of we have to do this, otherwise we can't save lives. I mean, it's an absurd point that we've hit. So yeah, we can discuss that next. So. Okay,
well now your background's in the science side of it, which is good because I don't think a lot of people really understand the difference between the different kinds of stem cells, and all they know is what they hear on TV, and we'll talk about that in a second. But while we booked this interview last week. Of course, yesterday, I had no idea the video was coming out yesterday. It happened in the middle of my show. I didn't even get a chance to watch it until I was finished with the show. But this latest video, not only is it the most graphic of all, but I mean, it's more than that. It's almost the most, I hate to use the word psychopathic, but that's the first word that comes to mind when I see some of the reactions of the people in this latest video.
It's certainly cold. It was hard for me to watch yesterday. I have to admit because it gets very gruesome. And I'd warn listeners if and anybody had a miscarriage or anything like that, they might actually have a hard time watching the video. It's pretty graphic in that sense. It's shocking, but it does also feel like a little bit more of a smoking gun, and you're getting more to the story because they've got a former STEM Express employee that they're interviewing who is explaining the process. Planned Parenthood put out a press release yesterday about it, stating how they had shown, invaded a woman's privacy by showing abortion. They didn't show any of that. There's no patient in the video. There's none of that. None of their talking points are actually accurate because they're assuming you haven't watched the video when they put out their statements. They show what happens afterwards, and that is not pleasant. They come in with high plates full of specimens, I guess, to use a euphemism, and they actually describe the process of separating out the parts and understanding how you get prices. And what becomes clear is that STEM Express did this for this Planned Parenthood at no cost to that Planned Parenthood because they just bring it to a separate room. The STEM Express employee comes in there, they procure the parts how they need to, and they pay Planned Parenthood per part. And that's the problem that, per the word scandal, that we're looking at. Because no matter if you're pro-choice or pro-life, you have to have an ethical quandary about the incentives being put into place here for them to possibly modify, alter procedures, or to prioritize making money on the harvesting of organs versus the patient that's in that room. And that's the precise reason that there are laws about trafficking in organs, because of the incentives it could do, or what it could, people with lots of money can then benefit and others can't. And also the idea of making humans a commodity is quite disturbing.
Well, and it's interesting. A lot of the same people that would, and the majority of the people that are defending Planned Parenthood have no intention of ever watching these videos. So we can, we can assume that they haven't seen this latest video or any of the others. They just take the bullet points and the talking points word for word. But I think a lot of those same people, if we started talking about allowing adult human beings, men or women, to perhaps sell a kidney to a rich person that needs a kidney, they would go nuts.
Yes, well, and even just research on prisoners, anything like that. And if you switch out the language, where it's like, well, they're already dying anyway. This is the precise reason that people during the Holocaust did surgery on folks who were being put to death. I mean, science can do things, of course, but it's the question of should it do things. And that's where morality and why we regulate research comes into place. And no matter what, you can't use the pounding of the fist on the table of this might save lives to justify the actions that we're seeing here. Nor should a clinic be focused on the harvesting of fetal tissue versus the patients that they're treating. And I think that that's also a concern from Planned Parenthood because they aren't consenting their patients, in my opinion, appropriately if you look at the consent forms. They aren't clarifying what's actually happening in the donation. And they aren't mentioning that they may be altering the procedure to obtain more organs. And these are also things that are actually ethically wrong, and they should have to be accounted for that. Even if you're pro-choice, you shouldn't want patients being treated this way, particularly either.
Well, and I think that's what happens when you start getting a profit motive in a field like this. And I'm glad you pointed out that even someone who's pro-choice, even people that previously defended Planned Parenthood, I think most reasonable people can agree that this is egregious behavior, no matter which side of this argument you're on.
Well, and that's the point. This isn't about banning abortion or not banning abortion. I mean, obviously, I have personal feelings that are pro-life in this sense, but this is about a clinic that's not operating appropriately and creating incentives to traffic in human organs and tissue. That is a different problem, and that is the reason why I think that, their funding should be brought into question. I certainly feel like I should at least not have to pay for this type of activity at the most minimum sense as an American. I don't feel like my money should go towards this. The more maximum sense, I have different options and opinions, but I feel at least I should be able to opt out.
Well, you would think so. So, of course, now let's talk a little bit about some of the talking points. I mean, the ones that you'll be able to address the most are the medical related ones, and of course, we're being told that these are secretly made videos, that they're violating people's privacy. There's all kinds of straw man attacks. But one of the talking points that's been released and has been pounced upon by some of the media and some members of Congress is that this is being done for important medical research, which of course is a lot of bunk. Tell us a little bit about why this isn't true.
Sure, because if you may or may not have watched Cecile Richards, the president of Planned Parenthood, on ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos, but even there, when she's finally cornered to say how many of her clinics are actually engaging in this donation, because if this is such a life-saving activity, she actually says less than 5 of her clinics are doing this. So to me, the first question is, it's so life-saving, why isn't this a widespread activity? Why are you doing it only in certain areas? 2, but if you start to peel away the science, the things that they say is it could save lives, and then there are a few folks who've tried to written articles to support and buttress this defense, and the fact is that, in fact, yes, in the late 60s, there was a cell line, and part of it came from a fetal tissue in Sweden from what was then a legal abortion. And this cell line is replicatable and still used today. You don't actually need to have any more fetal tissue donated to it. And that's what they've been using for vaccine research for a long time, and that's produced a rubella vaccine, polio vaccine, all sorts of vaccines. And so, yes, good things have come from, a heartbreaking situation. But what they're not saying is they don't need more tissue to do that activity. They don't need more tissue to continue vaccine research with these cell lines. They have several cell lines that are widely available, and you can use those to do that research. I think the second thing they kind of try to say is that there's something very super special about the liver. And no, it's just a very small liver in the baby, in the sense. What they're doing, because Stem Express basically is kind of taking advantage of the fact that you can buy these parts cheaper. I mean, I look at it in Stem Express as basically found a window into cheaper parts and livers to then mark them up and sell them to other people, because the liver is a way you clear drugs. So when you do testing to see how it'll impact the body or what kind of toxicities would happen, you can use a human liver to do that. Typically what we would do is animal models. You can use a field liver to do this, but the upside of for that is that there are folks who've done 3D bioprinted livers. There's a company in San Diego who does it. These, unlike the donated fetal tissue liver, can last up to 40 days versus 3. So there is an alternative to do that kind of research. And there's also the idea of the stem cells itself. Yes, there's certain embryonic stem cells that are associated with fetal tissue. The upside, again, is science has found a way to solve this problem, because no matter what, for everything they say is it could save lives, fetal tissue is too scarce to actually be widely applicable for any solution in the medical industry. So no matter what, they need to find other alternatives. And I think that that's where they are. And what I try to lay out in my article is that there are alternatives. You can get stem cells from a placenta, which is something that's discarded after you deliver a live and healthy baby. You can get it from the umbilical cord after delivery as well. And these are all places that you can, if you are delivering your baby, you can say you'd like to donate to science. And those are positive sources where the baby does not need to be harmed. And in fact, you can happily deliver your child and hug them. And stem cells can be donated. And as far as embryonic stem cells that are available earlier, they have science and cell. There's been scientists who have basically reverse engineered pluripotent stem cells without human cloning, so they can be reproduced again and again, so you don't need to rely on fetal tissue. So when Cecile Richards says it could save lives, notice she never says it does. And notice she's never specific about how, really. It's just this euphemism, and she refers to Parkinson's or vaccines. I've already proven the vaccine thing false. The work in Parkinson's with fetal tissue actually produced the opposite of positive results and created more side effects for the patients and more harm. What actually benefited Parkinson's patients was use of adult stem cells, which obviously you can get from adults, right? So she's actually misleading me quite a bit, but it's doing what Planned Parenthood always does. Planned Parenthood, it's like, without Planned Parenthood, you'll never have health care for women. Without this fetal tissue donation, we'll never have any inventions in science. And that's just a very zero-sum game. That's a false premise in the first place. Science will continue to invent and create medicine because there are multiple ways to get to the truth. And you don't have to compromise your ethics like this, like they're suggesting, because if it's so important, how come only 5 clinics are doing it? And second of all, she never names actually anything that comes from it. They're misleading you at best to justify the fact that they're profiting from the sale of these organs to small-time researchers who largely, when I look at the funding, are mostly funded by the National Institute of Health, which, like anything in the government, is funding research that most of the private sectors already moved on from, and kind of perpetuating just this academic study of fetal tissue that actually isn't resulting in anything that's really novel in the last 15 years and helpful for patients. So that's the problem with the talking point for me, because you shouldn't have to feel like, well, at least some good's coming from it. Not much good's really coming from it, and they're all alternatives. So you don't have to think, gosh, we need more abortions because otherwise we'll never have new medical research. So that's what they're actually saying. And there are other ways as a society we can look to invent medicine, and I highly suggest we may want to consider those.
Well, and one of the things that, and I'm glad you mentioned the threat that we always hear from Planned Parenthood is that, you know, people that are opposed to them want to take away women's health care. And you hear it from a lot of people that have they don't really follow what's going on. They just kind of see what they see on TV, or maybe they watch Jon Stewart at night or something like that. And they think that Planned Parenthood is this benevolent organization that gives women mammograms for free and gives them free birth control pills and doesn't do anything else. And meanwhile, I look, I'm not a woman, so I can't say, but I don't know if I would want to go get my mammogram done by somebody that's selling parts out the back door.
I suggest there might be better places to get health care. Yeah. I think that's a fair assumption. I mean, they're saying they serve underserved communities. My thought on this is that if there's demand, they shouldn't be fearful that it wouldn't be met and these people wouldn't have a place to go. Planned Parenthood is not women's only alternative for health care. That's kind of absurd. What they are is a heavily subsidized, medical outfit that basically competition can't come in because half of their money comes from the government. So any competitor has to come in and do it for half the cost they do or get the same government grant. So I mean, they're basically a propped up healthcare that just, preys on women, in my opinion, to like move them to this thing till they get them to the big profit thing of the abortion. It's this vertical integration of starting off with, learning the sex education, being like, healthcare with no questions kind of thing, no judgment. And, so they're just encouraging. To me, it just feels very perverse to encourage a supply chain that eventually moves a woman to an abortion, because that's their big payoff, because that's where they make the money. And that's an absurd profit mechanism in my head anyway. I understand that people who are pro-choice will differ on this, but this isn't the only other way for women to get health care. And in fact, as much as we might be horrified, there are companies who are building private clinics that can do it for a lot less than Planned Parenthood as far as an abortion. And that's not a positive thing, and it's not something I want to see in life, but they can't justify that they're the only place women can go or that's the only way it can be done. That's absolutely absurd.
Well, and I think that's really the point of all this is they're really. I used to think that they're in the abortion business, but I really honestly don't even think they're in that business anymore. I think what business they're in now, they're almost the equivalent of one of these green energy companies. They're just in the scare business. I mean, they scare people into thinking that they're necessary so that they get that federal funding that helps them, that they need to stay afloat.
Yes, I mean, that's the point. They have to every year scare up enough people to continue getting almost $500 million from us. And, to do this, because apparently there's no other way the women in the United States of America to get health care, which is absolutely absurd. So their business model, to me, is propped up and subsidized by the government, which makes it very hard for competitors to come in and probably provide much better health care for women.
Well, and certainly, at least the patients would be more better informed. Anyway, it seems like there would there would be an opening for someone to come in and provide this kind of care in a little. I mean, I don't think there's any way to provide that kind of care in a truly ethical way. But at least it would be more ethical than this. I mean, they wouldn't be lying to their patients.
Yeah, and at least for those of us who are pro-life, we wouldn't have to know that our tax dollars are subsidizing something that we morally object to. That is unconscionable to anyone who's pro-life. To me, that's at least a reasonable outcome from this. Is why I think it is important to consider defunding them. They have an appropriate, they aren't behaving in an ethical manner with their patients, and they're doing services that I think create incentives that are very problematic and unethical for society.
Well, now that we've kind of knocked down the entire house of cards when it comes to the talking points, what's the next step? I mean, obviously, looks like there's actually going to be a vote in the Senate. It probably won't pass, and I doubt the president would ever sign it. So on the political side, I don't know if there's really any stop to the funding for now, at least until 2016. Do you think there's a slight possibility that somebody might actually be prosecuted for this?
Depending on how more videos come out, I mean, it can certainly change policy around what they're doing. Like, I imagine the outcome of this is Planned Parenthood is likely going to stop these tissue donations because of, even if you are pro-choice, the incentive being created there, that may be one outcome, that may be a fallback that occurs. I agree. I don't think the funding is likely to be cut off now with the current president in the office. But I do think we should also look to states. States also provide their local Planned Parenthood funding, and many Republican governors are initiating their own investigations within their states. And that may be where we actually see more action. You likely wouldn't hear about it in the national media, but it is a place, if you're locally interested, to look to your state government to do that, to at least make sure that state funds don't continue to go to these clinics. Would be one place to go. And then I think, secondly, again, to me, abortion isn't, the way to win this argument isn't to ban it, it's to make it unthinkable to people. I think that the service that these videos do is remind folks of what it really is when we turn away and say, well, we're just going to let them choose even if I think it's wrong. It reminds us of the human being that's there being parsed apart for parts. And I think that's the more important thing, because I think no matter what, we're likely in a world where abortion may be restricted, it may become more rare. But the thing I think you really want to do is change the culture. You need to make people believe it's an unthinkable act so they don't worry about banning it or not banning it, because that just becomes a political football. What you want to do is make sure the woman who's facing a choice knows that there's a better way, or rethinks her decision, or considers adoption. I think you play in the culture on this if you're pro-life, and I think you try and convince people that there are alternatives and you don't have to do this, that there are people who will help you.
Well, I honestly think 50 years from now, once birth control technology becomes a little bit better and people change their way of thinking, I think we'll look back on this 40 or 50 year stretch here since Roe and think, how could we have been that barbaric? But it's a long road. I mean, it's taken us 42 years to get this far. It's going to probably take another 42 to dig out of the hole. So I mean, I guess this is just kind of the opening salvo in what could be an interesting fight. I imagine there are more videos. I can't think how they could get worse. Do you think they'll actually get worse?
I suspect they might. I think they were supposed to be up to 10. We're at 3, and I think the pattern's been releasing 1 a week. So, I don't know if they'll get more gruesome than this week, but they may. In fact, I'm almost more nervous about the fact of them showing a larger baby who's more developed in the sense. But there should be theoretically about 7 more of these videos, and we'll see what they put together. But this is, I think, a sting operation has been in. They did it for almost 3 years, so there's plenty of tape.
Yeah, they said they have thousands of hours, and what I do like is as soon as they release the edited version, they also release the full version of every interview, so that whole talking point about these videos being edited just gets knocked right down. I find that one kind of ridiculous. It's like your spouse being caught cheating but complaining you looked at their phone. It's just kind of absurd. It's like you still have done something wrong here. These videos being edited are not the problem here. What's happening in your clinic is. Plus, right here's the full unedited version. So, I honestly don't know where this is going, but I will say I probably will wait until after my show's over to look at the next one, because they leave me speechless every time.
Yeah, they take a little bit to process. They're pretty stunning. We don't spend a lot of time thinking about what abortion is, and this reminds you.
Yeah, well, and I'll be honest, it wasn't really one of those issues that until this came along. I mean, I had my beliefs, but I never talked about it on the air, for one thing. I mean, this is it's one of the rules they tell talk radio hosts. You're not going to convince anybody on this, but. This is just too big to not talk about.
And I'm kind of similar in the sense of I came to my beliefs of being pro-life, but more of the sense of a stand-down attitude about it. But these videos, they definitely get your attention, and they make you rethink of how serious should I be about being pro-life, and how much should I do, and should I talk about it? Should I start to talk about it with people I know? It does bring up the conversation and make people that don't think too much about it to maybe reconsider their point of view.
Well, if there's anything good to be taken out of something so horrible, that could be it. I want to thank you again, Amy Otto from the Federalist. And if anybody hasn't read your article about the medical side of this, I definitely suggest they check it out at the Federalist. Where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at AmyOtto8, my handle. I'm usually available there. Other than that, you can read my work at the Federalist.
Well, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to talk with us today. Hopefully next time we get to talk about something a little bit more cheerful.
Yes, that would be great. Thanks, Don.
Thanks a lot. Again, Amy Otto from the Federalist. I got to take a break. We'll be right back. News Talk 1270 KIML. 70 KIML. 70 KIML. 70